Hello and welcome to Season 3, Episode 23 of Logicast, the AWS News podcast brought to you by Logicata. I'm Carl Robinson, CEO and co-founder of Logicata, and I'm joined today by my old faithful colleague, John Goodall. How are you doing today, John?
Isn't Old Faithful a geyser somewhere?
I think it is actually, yes. Or a
Is
geezer. You say geezer, I say geyser. Let's call the whole thing off.
No. For our international viewers, a geezer in the UK is a gentleman you wouldn't want to meet in a dark alleyway.
He's a good. He's Ebenezer good.
Oh, God. Oh, dear.
He's a geezer. He's a real crowd pleaser. Anyway, how you doing today, John?
Now I'm just broken after that.
I don't know if you're old enough to get the musical reference that I just inserted into the introduction there.
No, the only Ebenezer I'm aware of is Ebenezer Scrooge from Christmas Carol and all the rest of it.
Yeah. Now I can't. I'm too old to remember the exact details of the musical reference. I can just remember the lyrics. So
that's concerning.
I should remember. But yeah, it's not coming straight to the forefront of my memory at the moment. Anyway, I thought I'd introduce you slightly differently today because usually it's as always. So let's try not to use those words. Hence the Old Faithful.
Yeah, we're going to confuse the transcription now. Just watch.
So we had hoped to have a guest today, but unfortunately, due to a diary clash, it is just John and I on the podcast.
Oh, the cat's back there. She's back there.
Oh, and the cat. Yeah, I've kicked the dogs out because I don't want them interrupting, so they're outside. But I'm sure we'll see some cat movement for those that are watching the video stream at some point. But we're not here to talk about 90s dance music or our family pets. As regular listeners to the podcast will know, every Friday, I curate a list of AWS news, which I share via my weekly AWS Roundup newsletter. And then John and I pick a subset of the articles that we would like to talk about on the podcast, sometimes with our guests, but no guest today. So we'll just talk about them amongst ourselves. So we have a selection of articles. So the first one is announcing a new feature which allows you to centrally manage member account root email addresses across your AWS organization. John, is this exciting? Sounds like it could bring some efficiency gains.
I'm unreasonably excited about this one in the same way that last week I was unreasonably excited about tax APIs. At this point, I'm an administrator and accountant, I think. I'm unreasonably excited about this. I mean, you're not wrong. So here's the... How can I fill some dead air? Because there's normally be a guest talking. Let's do some dead air filling with a definition. So, right, when you first create an AWS account, if you do it through the sign up for an account button, the first thing you do is you put in an email address and a password. That's pretty normal for signing up for services. You've got a username, password, and then you give them some payment details because they're not going to let you go without that. But that's the second thing. The first thing is you put in an email address. That email address has to be unique because, obviously that's how they kind of contact you. And that becomes the root user. Now, the root user, they log you in with that because that's the only thing that exists in that account at that point in time. And then they say, create an IAM user, do IAM IDC, do something, and then put MFA on the root user and log the hell out and never use it again. Right. And that was fine because apart from billing, and there was a little checkbox and you could enable federated or IAM access to billing as well, you didn't need the root user for anything once you had ticked that little box to say that people that aren't root can look at billing, and you then have an administrative user. And the administrative user could do everything apart from change the root user email address. And that makes sense because that's kind of this account is this. It was sort of the unique ID for the account, effectively. Great, wonderful. But because it's root and it's basically, the ultimate Uber admin, trying not to use specific deities, but the ultimate Uber admin, you couldn't put any restrictions on it. So if ever you'd locked yourself out, you'd done something silly with a service control policy or whatever, you could log in as root and undo those things. Right? And that's important, that's useful, but that makes it a highly privileged account and it's functionally impossible to restrict it. Cool. Now you go set up your organization because you're doing the sensible thing and you've got a payer account and then you set your organization up. And because you've done the sensible thing and you've vended the accounts, you haven't created them and added them to the org. You've vended the accounts from within the org. It's a little button that says, give me a new account. In that scenario, you put the email address into the form and the name of the account, but no password. And that means that the root user doesn't actually have a password when it's vended through an organization. That's kind of handy because it means that it's not another thing to go and worry about and secure and sort of all the rest of it. Because what you probably do, and I'm an advocate for this, is you create a service control policy across your organization that says the root user is not allowed to log in. Because you can actually do that. You can set that. It won't ever apply to the management account because, again, service control policies cannot be applied to the management account for this exact reason. So you can never lock yourself out completely. Cool. But if ever you needed to change the root user email on a vended account, what you had to do up until the 7th, so up until last week, was you had to find that email. You had to make sure it was a real email because, it was very possible to just make one with a fake email, but you had to make sure it was a real email. Do a password reset. Make sure you don't have any SCPs preventing you from doing this or preventing you from logging in. Complete the password reset, log in, then go and change the root user email. And that's an enormous faff, and it's incredibly involved, and it's massively time consuming. And then what you've got is you've then got one or more AWS accounts with root users that you then need to do MFA and secure them and put them in a password manager and all the rest of it. So that was a pain. Nobody liked it. It was sort of accepted as a necessary evil, and you did your absolute utmost to make sure that you never needed to do it. Fine. That works so long as you're in proper control of your org and it's been done properly from the get-go and sort of all the rest of it. The scenario where it starts to fall over is where people have vended a new account off of the org and they've used their personal email address. They've used their own work email address. The email address is inaccessible, doesn't exist anymore, blah, 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 blah. Reasons you can't do a password reset. And there was ways around this, ways and means. You could raise support tickets and validate that you had, legitimate control of the account through other means. Fine. But it was involved and manual and you had to deal with support. And support really good, but it was a pain. What this does is that eliminates it completely. Because now what you can do is any account that is a member of the organization, i.e., not the management account, you can just change it. Hallelujah. Just, brilliant. I love that so much. Because here's the thing the email address stops being the unique reference for the account 1 microsecond after the account is created because it's then got an account number. Great. Wonderful. So now the account number is the unique ID, as it was anyway, and the email still needs to be unique because they will still send communications, security alerts and whatever to the root user, but you don't have to log in to change it. Hallelujah. Now, this gets even more exciting when you start thinking about tools like, and I'm a big fan, and we're a big fan as a company, when you start thinking about tools like org formation. Now, org formation is a way of programmatically managing your organization. Big shout out to the tool, generally the community. I'm semi-active in the community. Love it. It's great. And again, that will vend accounts and do lots of cool things for you. As and when there's updates available, and I'm really hoping that there will be for this, you should be able to programmatically do that. So because it's available through the CLI and the SDK and the console, you should never even have to log in to just change the root user. Brilliant. Love that so much. All of a sudden, it's taken this enormous, annoying pain point for very specific scenarios, and it's gone. It's just gone. That's just, I've just taken the painkiller and it's problem solved now. Thank you so much.
You preempted my question because I was going to ask about org formation and whether or not this is something that could be integrated into that.
Yeah,
controlled by that.
Yeah, potentially, because it's available through the SDK. It might be. So the way org formation works is it uses and I might be wrong, and I don't know if Olaf is listening, but I did have a chat with him about it. My understanding is it uses the email address as the unique ID within its kind of data model, right? So when you want to import an account into your organization and you want to import it into the state file for org formation, you add the records as much detail as you've got, but make sure you've got the email address because it's checking that for uniqueness. Now, if you can change that, all of a sudden that process gets somewhat more complicated. So I suspect there'll have to be some sort of, and I'll raise a GitHub ticket for this at some point. There'll have to be some sort of like either or going on. So if it's in your state file and it has an account ID, that's the unique reference, and then you can change the email with feckless abandon. If it's not, then the email is still the unique point until your state file is updated to then understand that there's an account number. Something like that. But this is me talking as a part-time architect, not a Node.js dev. So I don't know how viable that is.
Well, you were certainly more excited about that than I was expecting. So yeah, you have become rather dull, haven't you? Tax and account admin, the things that you seem to be getting excited about these days.
I know, right?
Anyway, before we move on to the next article, I did have a cheeky Google because it was annoying me that I couldn't remember my own musical reference. It was, of course, the Shaman who did the song Ebenezer Good back in the 90s. So in case any of the listeners were wondering, or shouting at the speaker, Carl, it was the Shaman. Yes, I know. I just couldn't remember. There we go. This wasn't something that I needed to recall immediately at that point, but we got there. Anyway, on that note, let's move along to the second article for this week, which is our first of this week on AI, because of course we have to have AI every week on the podcast now. It's difficult to do a news podcast without talking about AI, but this sounds like some pretty useful AI here. The article is entitled Amazon CloudWatch announces AI-powered natural language query generation. So I often know what I want to see from graphs in CloudWatch and other tools like Datadog, etc., but I don't know how to configure them, or I don't have time to configure them. So this sounds like it could potentially be quite useful for people like me that can just ask questions of the tool and get some useful answers. What do you think, John?
Yeah, you can ask it instead of me.
Yeah, so you love it in that case. It's, yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, Datadog's okay for this. CloudWatch querying is historically quite hard, and things like elk stacks, Kibana, again, they're historically a little bit tricky to get your head around because the syntax is quite complicated if you're not a developer, right? If you're a dev sort, then it's, you sort of go, oh, okay, it's this, and you sort of type it all out, and it kind of makes sense. If that's not the world you live in, then it's quite hard to understand that syntax because there's lots of brackets and you can put pipes in for either or. And then there's, not equals. It starts to get a little bit complicated if you don't live and breathe the world already. What this is doing, as you quite rightly identify, is you are asking it in plain English-ish, because, DynamoDB is not plain English, but in nearly plain English, what you want to see. And the LLM is going, brilliant. Here's what the query should look like. And it'll probably get it wrong, but it'll probably get it 90% there, and you can just kind of fiddle with the data from there. So great, love this. No complaints. Fundamentally, this is throwing something like, this query at ChatGPT or Bedrock or whatever, and saying, please generate a CloudWatch logs query to show me blah, 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 blah. But it's got all that context data as well. So you can just say, the example is show me the 10 slowest Lambda requests over the last 24 hours. And it won't say, here's the query you need to run. Just sort of go, well, here's the query, bang, done. There you go. Great. Wonderful.
Do you see yourself using tools like this?
Yeah, because it's like it's like remembering how to write a regex. I can never remember. I know how to do it. I can never remember. So I'm perpetually looking up syntax. So anything that makes, and this is kind of the thing that the dev advocates at AWS are sort of saying about LLMs more generally, Code Whisper and those kinds of things. What they're good at is that low value work where it's not the way you think, it's not the skill set that you've got, it's just remembering the syntax. And some people are really good at it, some people aren't. I'm not. So it's just kind of taking that and doing it for you, which is what machines are really good at. It's here's how you write that. And let's not forget that LLMs, large language models, I feel the need to say that every once in a while in case people aren't familiar. All they actually do is they guess with a reasonable certainty the next likely word in the output, and they just sort of keep going until the likely end is an end. That's all they're actually doing. And it's really clever how they're doing it, but they're just sort of going, okay, for this question, odds are the answer is this string of words, please. Cool. And that means that it's probably quite good at this sort of thing. It's probably less good at analytical work, but it's probably quite good at how do you write a query to do this.
One thing I did notice in this short article was that the feature is only supported in US East, US West, and Asia Pac. Does that mean people who have CloudWatch installations in other regions cannot use it, or does it mean you just have to run it from there?
So yeah, CloudWatch logs are regional. So you can't do it directly against your London-based logs. CloudWatch logs insights are also regional, although they are cross-account. So what that means is you can look at all the logs from all the log groups across your entire account within that region. So again, you couldn't do it. There's nothing stopping you from replicating your log somewhere else through some sort of subscription or something like that if you were really desperate to do this. But as it sits, if you have logs already in North Virginia, Oregon, or Tokyo, then you're golden. Otherwise, sorry. But this is still kind of one of my big bugbears about the whole AI rollout. Is it's all really inconsistent where things are. You'd expect some sort of new feature like this to be in more than just 3 regions. You'd expect to see it, maybe not in London, but you'd expect to see it in Ireland and another, Stockholm maybe, another European region, as well as somewhere in Asia Pac and a couple in the States, rather than just those 3. So it feels like there's some sort of AI kludgery going on, whereby they can't just roll it out everywhere because of, I don't know, available compute, something like that, because they're going to be running this in their own data centers, obviously. And as far as I know, North Virginia is the biggest region. There's like 6 availability zones or something silly, rather than like the 3 that we get in London and the 3 that we get in, there's loads of them. So it might just be the capacity to run something like this is what's dictating this rollout. But yeah, I'd have loved to have seen this in more European areas.
Well, watch this space. I'm sure the rollout to other parts of the globe will follow suit. So let's move on to the next article for this week. Another feature announcement, and this one is entitled "Detect Malware in New Object Uploads to Amazon S3 with Amazon GuardDuty." So this is allowing you to effectively detect any malware in any objects that you're uploading to S3 before that malware becomes a problem when you then go to process those objects elsewhere. So I've kind of summarized it a little bit, John, but my big question when I was reading this is what have people been doing up until this point to
getting infected, I think.
Sounds painful.
Yeah, so I mean, this is a specific kind of workflow that you're going through for this to be useful, right? So in traditionalist approaches, you would upload your file to your server and then have an endpoint scanning tool. Lots are available. I'm not going to name any because they're not sponsoring us. To do that scan, and then your application would go and put it into the storage, right? And it'll be in sort of a ring-fenced environment. So you go through an upload server, it gets scanned, and then it gets processed from there, or it gets quarantined and deleted. Cool. A more modern architecture has you doing things a little bit differently, where you're generating pre-signed upload URLs, and then you're using that to upload directly to an S3 bucket. Now, why would you want to do this? Well, one, it's really cool. So there's that. 2, it cuts out this kind of server process where you're uploading to a server and then uploading to S3. So you're not kind of double hopping. So it's a bit quicker. Uploading directly to S3 also utilizes the AWS core network backbone. So it's faster, especially if you turn on things like global transfer accelerator, and you can upload to your local regional endpoint, or you can upload to wherever it's closest to you, and it goes through their backbone, which is a lot faster than the open internet because it's all these lines, big thick cables, which great. But that then means that it's already in your S3 bucket. Now, if it's in S3, it's not active. It's probably not going to be able to spread anywhere. But then your downstream process that's gone, oh, ping, we've been uploaded, I'll go and process this, could then have a problem because that file hasn't been scanned. What this is doing is it's scanning it directly in S3. So you don't have to worry about this process of let's scan the thing first in either our upload client, like the app or whatever, or in this middleware server. It's now just, we can cut all of that out and go straight to S3. GuardDuty will do it. Brilliant. What's even better though is you can enable GuardDuty malware protection for S3 without enabling core GuardDuty. Why is that interesting? GuardDuty can get expensive. It's not horrifically expensive. I've never seen it cost more than a few $100 a month. But if you're bootstrapped, if you're really hot on that kind of thing, then you can turn this bit on without paying for all the rest of it. Great. I like that. I like that a lot. All of a sudden, you've got this great new scanning feature, and I can put it on over here. Hallelujah. just fantastic. So yeah, no real complaints. Limited free tier, obviously, but
I think
pay
that's
for
your
something
second
eventually.
hallelujah today. I think that was your second hallelujah today. So yeah,
Okay.
praise AWS. They're doing something right.
What's the new boss? Praise Matt Garman.
Yeah, all this wonderful stuff coming out of AWS within a month of the leadership change. So fabulous.
What is it? Okay, and once you get past the free tier, it's new accounts will receive 1,000 requests and a gig for 12 months. Existing will be eligible to participate in the free tier until next June. Fine. And you get the same tiering. You get 1,000 and a gig each month. After that, S3 scans, you will pay 95 cents per gigabyte and 34 cents per 1,000. So it's not exactly horrific. It's, yes, if we're generating a lot of UGC, user generated content, and pushing a lot through, it will start to get spendy, but it's not bad. And that's kind of the thing with a lot of these AI tools, is they will start to get spendy quite quickly, but it's a great way of getting going.
Cool. And it is also available almost everywhere from the get-go, apart from GovCloud and China. But
which
the
is
rest
just
of the world,
GovCloud anyway, to be honest. China is just GovCloud, but in China.
Yeah. But the rest of the world can use this from today. So, or well, from the 11th of June when the announcement was actually made. So from last week. So there we are. So on that note, let's move along to our next article for this week. And this one is all about cost optimization. And we've spoken about cost optimization a number of times on the podcast, but this is an article from the AWS Cloud Operations and Migrations blog, and it's looking at cost optimization through a slightly different lens. The title is Best Practices to Optimize Costs After Mergers and Acquisitions with AWS Organizations. So if you are an acquisitive company or a company that has been acquired and both the acquirer and the acquired parties are using AWS, this article goes on to describe a number of different optimizations that you should be considering to make sure that the new combined organization is not spending more than it should. And a lot of it is fairly standard best practice, but as I say, looked at through a slightly different lens. I think there's one or two things that we wouldn't normally cover off, which are in this article. So yeah, thoughts on this one, John?
That I wish it had come out a week earlier, so our previous guest, who did a bit of M&A, could talk about it.
Yeah. Well, there we are. Timing.
I know, right? This would be right up his straight. Yeah, so here's the rub. If both organizations, and this is not common, but if both organizations are both using AWS and have already done all of the sensible optimizations already, then it gets kind of complicated because, they've both got things at org level. They've both got reserved instances and savings plans, and they have time to run on them and so on. And what's pretty common in an M&A scenario is you end up reducing your overall footprint. So, 1 + 1 = about 1.8 typically, because, we can do that in this, we can do that in that, and that's eventually it kind of down a little bit, especially considering that most M&As are of similar sorts of businesses. It's law firms joining. It's I don't know, logistics firms joining. It's not a law firm buying a shipping company. Typically, I'm sure that happens, but in that scenario, it would just be, let's just change whose name is on the header and then move on with our day. There's not really a big thing to kind of join up. But in a world where you're similar businesses and you've merged or you've been acquired, then it becomes more complicated. Really itchy nose today. Don't know where that's come from.
I'm sure there's a superstition around that. I don't know what it is, but yeah.
I don't have any salt. I have a packet of indigestion tablets I can throw over my shoulder. There we go. I have to pick them up.
I hope you didn't hit the cat.
No. The cat's back there. She's fine.
No animals were harmed in the making of this podcast.
I just need to tidy up a bit in the office now. Oh, well. But yeah, so the things that they start to talk about is things you should kind of be doing anyway, but you could go a little bit further because you sort of need to. They talk about cost allocation tags, and that's really useful because you can sort of say, it's from this department, it's from this project, it's got this cost code, it's from this base company, whilst you kind of go through the process of doing the merger, and it's sort of, well, we're running this service in this company and this service in this company, and they're the same thing. Can we merge them? And then there's a project, you go and merge them. Cool. And that's cool. What they say, you then identify overlapping workloads, and then you can start to remove those overlapping workloads. Wonderful. Cost Explorer is good at that anyway, but once you start doing cost allocation and doing your tagging properly, it gets much better because it's just got more data to work with. They talk about Cost Optimization Hub, and again, that's something you should be using anyway because it's really good. It's pretty new and it's really good. But yeah, just turn that on and it will usually spit something out, and the more data you give it, the better. It does talk about Trusted Advisor because they love talking about Trusted Advisor, but that may or may not even be enabled for you. It's enabled for everyone by default, but you don't get all of the recommendations unless you've got business support or better. And then, optimize post-merger, because once you've got the data, you can then develop a consolidated strategy, as they like to say. And you can't say that in a sensible voice, can you? You've got to say that with either an adenoid problem or, from the back of your throat, because it's a consolidated businessman strategy. You can't say it in a normal voice. But again, that's kind of what they say. It's consolidated strategy for things like archiving and storage and sort of all the rest of it, so that you're doing the same things everywhere. And backups are quite good for that too. Make sure you've consolidated your strategies for those. So you've done that through a policy. You said at the central level, here's how we do backups, tag everything properly. And we like doing that. And it just sort of goes on and it talks about license costs. And that's not necessarily an M&A thing. It's just more a business scale thing. And large businesses tend to do M&A a lot more than small businesses do. Small businesses tend to get acquired, get absorbed, rather than being this complicated merger. They tend to just sort of get absorbed. And then, document and yada, 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 yada.
Yeah, I guess usually the acquiring party is going to be larger, and therefore they're likely to have better purchasing agreements in place, whether it's committed spend agreements with AWS or with other software licensing providers, etc. And therefore that's a potential way for the acquired party to save. One thing I did want to quickly pick up on, you mentioned Trusted Advisor. The article says you need enterprise support, and you said business. And when I read the article, I thought, I didn't think you do need enterprise support for Trusted Advisor. Do you think that's incorrect?
I was pretty sure it's business. Like, you get Trusted Advisor kind of standard by default, and then you get extras when you enable business support. I mean, I don't want to call AWS out and say that they're wrong, but I was pretty sure it was business.
I was too, because I know we've got a number of customers running it, and as far as I'm aware, we don't have any customers.
The only difference,
we'll
tell you what the difference is. It's business support per account, but when you're enterprise or enterprise on-ramp, then Trusted Advisor can be enabled across every account, as opposed to just piecemeal.
Yeah. Cool. Okay. Anything else to say on this one?
My nose is still really itchy.
Yes, I Googled that, and apparently it's a sign of a row. So I don't know if it's that you're about to have one or you've had one, but the superstition is it's a sign of a row. So, yeah.
I think it's just hot.
At least I assume it said row and not row. I'm not sure what the significance of that would be, but yeah, either you're about to have a row or go rowing if your nose is itchy. So there we are. So on that note, let's move on to our final article for this week, which is all about AI again. Woohoo! This is a slightly more business-focused article. Amazon announced last week that they are launching an AI startup accelerator, and they've committed $230 million of credits to this accelerator program to help AI startups accelerate their development by being able to play around with AWS without it costing them any money. So thoughts on this one, John?
I mean, we've seen this sort of, not colloquially, that's not the word, we've seen this just sort of generally anyway, in conversations that we've had with people like account managers and with some of our customers and prospects and people in the community, and we've sort of seen this. AWS are throwing money at AI projects because, well, why wouldn't they? They were kind of on the back foot for AI in general, and now they're sort of trying really hard to deal with that by throwing money at people, I think. So this is just kind of codifying what we've already been seeing.
Yeah, I guess it's a little bit more of a structured program that people can apply for. But I think there's perhaps more than $230 million of credits available if you know the right channels to obtain those credits, which can be direct through via your account manager or via a partner such as Logicata.
There's the
we've seen
plug.
these.
There's the plug.
Generally resist doing those, but that seemed appropriate and not too in your face. But there we are. We've seen these kind of accelerators before in various different vertical markets, healthcare, education, and so on and so forth. I guess this is nothing new from AWS, but just more investment in the growth of AI, which can only be a good thing.
Well, good for the bottom line at any rate.
Yeah. Well, I guess whether you think AI is a good thing or not is debatable. There are good parts of it, and there are slightly less good parts of it.
This is where we get all neo-techno-political about AI and technology in general is neither good nor bad inherently. It's all about the application and ethics frameworks and standards and all the rest of it. And I go into my business voice again.
So how much do you think AI is going to influence the upcoming UK general election?
No comment.
Yes, well, this is a tech podcast. It's not a politics podcast. So if we want to talk about that, then perhaps we should rebrand or start a different channel. Anyway, on that note, we have reached the end of our time for season 3, episode 23 of Logicast. So if you're still with us, thank you for putting up with us. We hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please tell your friends. Obviously, we are available to download from wherever you get your podcasts. And if you want to see what John's cat is doing, we're also available to stream on YouTube. Thank you, John. As always, got it in there at the end for your insights on the podcast. We'll be back next week with another episode for you, and hopefully with a guest from the AWS community. Thanks for listening. See you again next time.